Hello folks, my name is Tim Henningsen. I am a professor of English here at COD. I teach a lot of writing and literature courses. My love of reading, I think, was really birthed at a young age. My great aunt, my godmother, Pat, she used to send me books for my birthday and for the holidays. And at the time, I wanted games, I wanted toys. I would sort of scoff at getting a book in the mail. But I think she really birthed in me this love of literature. And so I don't think it was until high school or maybe even college that I sort of looked at my bookshelf in my bedroom and saw all the books that she had given me, some of which are behind me now. And I really sort of learned to appreciate that. And so I think I owe much of my current profession to her for sort of instilling that love of books at a very young age. I was a business major at one point. I was a computer science major at one point. I actually started school as an astronomy major. And so I wanted to be an education major. And so I just sort of, I bounced around. I really struggled to find a discipline that, you know, could sort of capture all of my interests. And then it wasn't until I was a junior, I took some literature classes that I was required to take just to get my degree, and sort of fell in love with some of the books that I was reading, some of the professors I had. And I remember being in class one day and thinking to myself, that would be one heck of a profession to have. So when I was in graduate school, I had a professor, Nancy Cirillo, God bless her heart. I was taking a Caribbean literature class at UIC. Sitting in that class, listening to her give a lecture on Caribbean history, Caribbean literature, I was just sort of mesmerized, and I guess I had that very lucky aha moment where I decided that that is exactly what I wanted to do with my life. There's no part of the world that in some way or another hasn't ended up in the Caribbean, culturally, racially, economically, etc. Their literature, I think, encapsulates a very world view, and so I found that anybody who reads Caribbean lit, for as obscure as it might seem, can find some way to relate to it. It was around this time, November of 2022, that the first sort of incarnation of ChatGPT came out, and people in my discipline and many disciplines sort of freaked out, wondering how is this going to change things? Are students just going to automatically cheat? I mean, it really sort of threw us into a tailspin. So the way I leverage AI in my classroom is, this is, I think, a simple example. I used to have my students write analysis papers, and they do some sort of critical thinking. They evaluate something, whether it's another paper, a piece of literature, a website, etc. I'm asking my students now to have ChatGPT or AI do that analysis. And then my students have to evaluate whether or not the AI is sort of up to par or meets their expectations in terms of the sort of analytical merits of it. But I think it teaches them that they can use it to do certain things, but once they really to sort of analyze and work with the text that the AI has generated, I think students are finding that it's surely not flawless. It is hard to predict where this technology is going to lead us. We're going to find that it is pervasive, it's everywhere. I mean, it's finding its way onto our phones, into our vehicles, into our homes. And like I said, it's already finding its way into our classroom. But I also think it compromises the human touch that is needed when you are trying to use writing, use rhetoric, use words to be able to communicate to an audience. And no matter what that is, if we're talking about trying to get that audience to take action, whether we're trying to get that audience to feel something, whether we're trying to get that audience to laugh, I still think a person needs to be the one to be behind those words. I am a total music dork. I have a massive, massive music collection. A lot of it is now digital, but back in the day I had thousands of compact discs. I've gone back to collecting vinyl. My dad gave me his collection, and I have grown that, and so I have hundreds of LPs lying around the house. And I can brag, I have almost every single thing that the Beatles and them in their solo careers put out on record. So I think most of my students are surprised to learn that I'm a halfway decent hockey player. I grew up in Minnesota. I spent my entire childhood on the ice, indoors, outside, playing in the winters. playing with a tennis ball in the driveway. It was just, there was nothing I loved more than to play hockey. When I moved to Chicago, it's early 2000s, tickets were cheap. I could go to games with my then girlfriend, current wife, and I sort of became a transplant Blackhawks fan.